haven't released or told anyone about this concept, but I wanna free source it. So I want it to be available to the public. Now, some dumbass might try and take it and try and throw a patent on it to try and lay claim to it. But you'll be able to build it yourself. So with the free source information, you'll be able to take this and do it yourself. So it's all completely based off of Tesla with magnets and coils, right? And the induction motor. So essentially, we have a coil, right? And then what we do is we pass a magnet by the coil, and we get the electric charge, right? We get that movement of the electron, right? That we can then harvest, right? But that requires a force. So what we have, like for example, in the windmills, we have the windmill itself powering the magnets going past the coil, which then collects positive and negative charge that can be harvested, right? So this is the basic design behind the induction motor and why it's so important and so unique. The induction motor can literally be found in almost all appliances. Anyways, but you can reverse this process, right? So, we had our magnet here that was going by the coil to produce the positive and negative electricity, right? So in the same function, we can supply the positive and negative inputs to the coil to then make the magnet spin. So the same concept, right? That's why the induction motor is so important, and the magnets and the coil and the way that creates energy, because not only can you spin the magnets to create the energy going this way, but you can also supply the energy to the coil to then move the magnet. So in a windmill operation, we have the windmill spinning the magnets past the coil. So then we collect the energy, and energy is actually flowing out, right? So in the same motor, when we put the inputs, the positive and negative inputs to the coil and spin the negative, it will force the magnets to spin, right? So in this particular scenario, where we're putting inputs in to the coil, forcing the magnet to spin, so it's almost like that basic equation where you can swap it around, right? So when we have the inputs coming in, that'd be an example of your washing machine or your dryer that takes that motor and spins everything, right? So we have the electricity coming in to the coil, forcing the magnet to spin, which it thus powers your washer or dryer to spin. And that's just one example, right? One appliance or two appliances. But you can apply that to just about anything else, right? So in the same concept, with the windmill turning the magnet past the coil, we then have the power going the opposite direction. So then you have this induction motor. So this is this whole theory is really based off of Tesla and this induction motor. The magnets themselves made me think of my buddy Tom, but it's a completely different theory. Tom was always trying to, back in the early 2000s, he was trying to use that magnetic force as a propulsion. But it made me think of Tom because I'm using the magnets to create motors in a different fashion. All right, so similar. It doesn't use it for propulsion directly, but we're using the Tesla stuff, right? But we're separating this Tesla motor into something else, right? So we have people that have that thought of, we have one motor, right there, and we have a secondary motor right there. You know, we have our wires, positive, negative, oops, negative. So the theory is, you know, if you can combine an input to an output, you know, you could put them in a closed loop where you're connecting the wire to the wire, and this would theoretically run indefinitely, right? However, when we're adding one to the other, we create friction, which slowly creates a loss. So you could set this up, you know, where you get a good RPM going and make that bridge, and it would probably run for a little while, but it would slowly dissipate because of that friction, that the energy loss created going into this other motor. So that's where we run into the problem with that particular idea or concept, right? So, but with the knowledge of the motor itself, and then we have the formula. I use a lot of sticky notes, but we have the formula for our electromagnetic frequency, the induced electromagnetic frequency. So what the thought process is with this is we use the input motor. So we have an input motor, but we put a fan system on the motor itself, right? So now we have a fan connected that we have to power with whatever power source, a battery or whatever, right? Now if we were to put a battery to one up here and then put in that closed loop, the battery itself, you know, if we were to use that as a battery, it would eventually die, right? If it was used as a backup source within that particular method, right? Because of that friction, there would still be a loss. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna have the one motor. Let's just say we're using 5 volts, right, as an input. So even up here, let's just say 5 volts. And then with the loss, we might be getting like 4.6 or something, right? So we'll slowly slow down to a stop because of that friction. So here's where we can use a different theory and different modern technology to apply a different concept, right? We're gonna apply that windmill concept with the induction motor concept with that connection, right? So now what we're gonna do is we have our input there. We're gonna add in a couple more fans. These are small and particularly shaped, right? Anyways, so we're adding in fans that don't actually touch, right? So we don't actually have any friction, we don't have any pull, no nothing, right? But the difference is we're gonna add a bearing to the center, okay? So we can make these fans go almost as fast, if not faster, than the one, and it will be powering 2, right? Without touching. So then with this in mind, we add in a series of magnets on each of these fans, right? All the way around each of the fans. And then we add more series of fans going this way, right? So we can go up to 3, we can bring it back down to 1, where we could even put an opposite motor. Let's just say we go 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, right? Where we can put an opposite motor as a collection point as well. But if we did that, we'd still run into that same friction problem. So, my theory and my thought is we have these series of fans that go off the 1 with the original voltage, but we have a bearing in the center to make it really easy to spin these fans off of that 1. And then we have additional fans, however many, going out that are powered off of each other with the bearings, with the magnets. So then we have multiple magnets spinning, and then we throw our coils for collection on the outside of these. So then, all of a sudden, we have a series of however many additional fans with these magnets spinning, creating their own individual motors without the friction. And that collection, my hypothesis is that collection off of however many fans we can get going off of the 1 is going to produce more energy than the initial 5 volts. And we don't have that loss due to friction, but then we're also creating a bunch of new motors that are independent. So off of the only motor that's being powered. So then theoretically, we can bridge these other motors, which is all Tesla stuff. We can bridge those to our original motor, and we can get our 5 volts necessary to power it, plus however much more we're generating from our series of fans. And theoretically, if it's done right, this production could be almost endless. So we not only get our necessary 5 volts to power it, but we have a ton of other energy being created, and all for free. So here's kind of an example of what our motor would be like, except there'd be fan blades, small fan blades around the outside edges, and then the bearing would be centered a little bit better. I didn't have a drill press, so when I started drilling, it kind of got off center. Anyways, essentially this is the kind of an example of what it would be though. So it'd be really easy to spin that fan. So this would actually be lightweight, not a resin. Probably be like a spoke system going down to the bearing, just to create it as lightweight as possible to be able to get it to spin as fast as possible and as continual as possible, based off of the wind movement from the original fan, right? So then we have a series of these lined up, and we put our coils around it. So again, this is a bigger version where you could almost put like a double or triple series of magnets going in, to create more of that power as we're going past the coil. So then we're going to be spinning these with their own fan blade. Maybe a 3D printer would be a good way to create the design, where you have a fan blade coming off, not a big one, just enough to catch from the original motor, which won't have magnets, just the fan. But then we're going to get all these other series of magnets spinning, and we're going to throw a bunch of coils around the outside of these spinning fans, right? So it'd be really easy to spin them because of that bearing. So with the fan system, we'll be able to get multiple going at close to the exact same RPM, except it's not just going to be one there's going to be multiple fans. So in theory, we can collect a significant amount of additional power than what's originally being used to spin the original fan. And in theory, in doing so, we can bridge the original and still be able to collect from whatever's left, right? We'll have an additional amount more than the original. So in theory, again, if we have our original fan, right? I was trying to draw that by looking at the camera. I should have been looking at the paper. It's kind of funny. So we got our original fan connected to our original motor. Goofy looking motor, huh? That's better. So we got our original fan connected to our original motor. So if this thing was made right, you could really do it in all directions, where you could put, one of the fans coming off this way, one off this way, one off this way, and then the series, going off of them. You know what I'm saying? So you could theoretically, you could harvest from multiple different angles and multiple different points as well. So you could create like an array, if you will, off of this concept and idea. As long as you're leaving room to be able to fit your coils around what you're spinning. But in theory, the flat, where you're just, on a surface like a table and continue out from there, you could go quite a bit further off of that initial power while still being able to collect from each individual motor that we're creating, and we're harnessing the actual wind energy, and we're eliminating that friction that would have otherwise been caused if we connected an input motor to an output motor. So you could go just down the line in a table, and if you encase that properly, you could really get that flow, create almost like a V shape, where that flow would just be going really good. Or you could almost do like a circular shape where they come out like this. But I feel like the circular shape, it may harvest more. Who knows? We have to play around with it. But I feel like it might be harder to manage versus like a table shape. But that would be irrelevant if this theory does work, because you can really do whatever you want as long as you're getting an output and being able to run the system on a closed loop, on that bridge. This is the kind of stuff that I'd be doing if I ever had money, to try and help better the world, change the world. Can you imagine anywhere just people being able to have electricity, have lights? I mean, you gotta think, there's a lot of places in the world, it's not like in America, or the U.S., or even Europe, or any of the developed nations. It's not like that everywhere, and there was a time that it wasn't like that for us, where you could just flip a light on. We take it for granted, but there's places where they can't do that. But with something like this, the whole world would be able to do that.